Maybe you've recognized some actions and behaviors in your pastor or spiritual leader that may fall under the category of spiritual abuse. One of the hardest decisions that you can make is, am I supposed to accept this abuse or extend God's grace? That's the topic that we're going to jump in today, and I'm going to share with you 4 steps that I took in the same situation. So if you're ready to learn, let's dive in. Hi friends, my name is Nick with the Life Recreated channel, and on this channel it's all about learning, healing, and growing through the Word of God. So if you're here for the first time, consider subscribing. Let's jump into today's question. Am I supposed to accept abuse when it comes from the hands of my pastor or spiritual leader? Now, this is the dilemma that I was facing around 5 years ago, and this is why it was so challenging. You know, the Word of God tells us in Matthew chapter 5, verse 38, you've heard the law that says the punishment must match the injury, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek also. So we got to understand the context of this text. You know, in Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus is talking about, he's referencing something from the Old Testament known as the Law of Retaliation. And what it basically meant was that if someone did you wrong, you had the opportunity to return the favor. But here in our text, Jesus takes it a step further and says, you know what, if someone does you wrong, you got to take a different approach. And here's the challenge and dilemma that we face when we're looking at spiritual abuse. Now, if we were to translate this under the Old Testament, it would say that if we're being spiritually abused, then we have the right to retaliate against that person that's abusing us. But because we're under the New Testament and underneath what Christ has said, we have to take a different direction if we find ourselves in that situation. And here's where the dilemma lies. So I'm going to share with you 4 steps that I took when I found myself in the same similar situation about 5 years ago. So step number 1, taking this to God in prayer. It is absolutely necessary and important for us to take this situation to God in prayer. And here's why. We need to make sure that our hearts are aligned with God's heart. The reason why is because it's possible that what we view as an offense or something that our pastor has done wrong against us could have simply been a mistake. I mean, if we be honest, all the pastors that I know are human beings and they make mistakes just like you and I. So when we take this to God in prayer, we can trust that God is going to show us the right and wrong path of this situation. Step number 2, if it's possible, go to your pastor or your spiritual leader to resolve the issue. You know, the Bible tells us again in Matthew chapter 18, verse 15, if another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense. If the person listens and confesses it, you have won that person back. So the Word of God is telling us that when we have an issue, even if it's with our pastor, that our responsibility is to go to that person and try and resolve the issue. Step number 3, if you're unable to change or resolve the situation, it may be time to leave. You know, in our text earlier in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus told us that when someone strikes us on the cheek, that we should turn the other cheek. He didn't say in that text that we need to sit and be a doormat for abuse. I believe personally that spiritual abuse can be one of the most painful and emotional things that someone can experience in the church, and quite frankly, it's unacceptable for a pastor or spiritual leader to be abusing those that he shepherds over. Now, we understand that ultimately that person is going to be responsible to God for their actions. And so if you're unable to resolve or come to any kind of resolution or balance within that relationship, it may be time for you to walk away. And finally, step number 4, and this is probably the hardest part of this, is to forgive and pray for your pastor. At the end of the day, we need to remember that pastors are human. And in my heart, I personally believe that there are very few men and women that come into ministry with the intent to hurt those that they shepherd over and that they pastor over. And so we have to understand that if we take this to God in prayer, He has the ability to kind of sort out that person's heart in that situation way better than we can. And so that's going to come with us being able to forgive that pastor, and it's also going to come with us being able to pray for that pastor. And in the long run, this is going to help with our healing process. So my friends, going through a spiritually abusive situation can be a hurtful and painful experience, but we need to remember that there is purpose in this experience. I hope that this message was encouraging to you. Until next time, continue to keep learning, keep healing, and keep growing.